think of Apple and how they've impacted our society and changed the way we use technology. So here's a list of sources that you guys will see that will help kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about, and you'll see the examples that will just float through the slideshow. So there's 3 points that I want to hit on today. I want to talk about the history of Apple and how it got started, the products that they make for us to use, and of course, their impact on our society and any kind of financial matter that I found that was interesting about the company. So when we think about the technology around us, the first thing I think of is Apple. Of course, with Apple comes iPhones, iPads, MacBooks, anything of that technological advancement I think is kind of cool, and it's going to impact our society. So let's begin with the history of Apple and how it got started. Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs are both college dropouts that formed a company with, of course, Ronald Wayne, and together they began making these little wooden boxes that would make kind of like illegal long-distance phone calls out of wood with no power outlet and no keyboard. Now, of course, whenever these three came together, Wozniak and Jobs both had 45% of the company together, and then Ronald Wayne owned only 10%. Now, what I thought was cool was since Ronald Wayne was a little older and he had financial assets that he had to worry about, he decided to sell his 10% of his company back to Jobs and Wozniak for a whopping $800. But little would he know that if he would have stuck it out with the Apple company, he would be worth a little bit over $3 billion today, just on his 10% share. And this can all be found on xtimeline.com. Now, with the invention of the Apple I that you'll see here, it's just a wooden box with no power outlet, no keyboard. Only thing it could do was make long-distance phone calls. So Wozniak and Jobs decided, hey, let's start a company, let's make it big. With that, since they are two college dropouts, they had no money. So it took them selling all their valuables, which was a van and 2 calculators, which gave them $1,300 to invest in the Apple company. Now, with their Apple company, they were able to develop the Apple II. And with the invention of this, it's a little more high-tech, a computer screen, a keyboard, and it had a power outlet. It let them sell 1/3 of their company to Mark McCullough for $250,000. Now we'll go to the Apple logo. This is the picture of the original Apple logo with Einstein under a tree reading a book. Now, they like to think that this represented knowledge and intelligence. However, whenever Steve Jobs put it on a computer, you couldn't really see the fine detail that the picture had to offer, which is why then some of us who recognize the multicolored rainbow half-bitten apple, which was, of course, the Apple trademark. But, of course, if you look at it on a laptop, it's kind of goofy. So Steve Jobs decided to drop the rainbow apple and go to what we have now, the solid color Apple logo. So now that we've seen how Apple got started, let's take a look at some of the products they have to offer. Like I said, when I think of Apple, I think of technology, and when I think of technology, I think of iPods and iPhones. So here's some of the products that Apple has to offer. There's the iPod family. There's been four generations of the iPod Classic and 2 generations of the Nano, the Shuffle, and of course the iPod Touch. And what I thought was pretty cool is if you look on apple.com, you'll discover that 275 million iPods have been sold since their creation in 2001. And as for the iPhone, it's just as important as a creation as the iPod. Of course, they were introduced in January of 2007, and there's been 4 generations of the iPhone created since they've been introduced into the technology world. And each year, each iPhone gets slimmer, sleeker, faster, and it has a lot more apps that there are to offer. So let's stop and think about how Apple's impacted our society. Since the net sales have gone up and so many iPods have been sold, so many iPhones have been invented, what do you think the net worth of the company would be? Well, let's look at our Apple impact. Since I said 275 million iPods have been sold since their creation in 2001, that means 22 million people in the United States have owned an iPod. That would be 11% of our population. Also, 7.4 million iPhones have been sold in this last quarter. And as you can see here, I just kind of have a graph that just depicts and shows you how much of the population owns an iPod compared to how many people in the world exist. So, I thought it was pretty cool when you think about Apple's network. We all know that ExxonMobil and the gas and the oil company is booming right now, and they're worth a little over $278 billion. The New York Times put Apple company at second with $222 billion as the net worth, and they only spend $1.9 billion on capital expenditures such as the software programs and the tools to manufacture the iPods and the iPhones. And of course, they were proud of themselves whenever they passed up Microsoft at $219 billion. So Apple's really changed the way that I look at technology and how I use it. I don't just use my iPod just to listen to music. I look at it and use it as a place of meditation and just kind of separates me from the world. Plus, also, it helps me avoid those awkward conversations you catch on the bus with a stranger going to class or working out at the gym on the treadmill. Plus, my iPhone, I don't just make phone calls on it. Anything that you could think of, there's an app for that. And also you can make plane ticket orders, and you can even have a pizza delivered to your front door. So I hope I can summarize, and I answered a lot of questions that you guys had about the Apple company, on their history and the products that they make, and the impact that they have on our society, as well as what their net worth could be. So Steve Jobs, he was a dropped out college kid who put all his time and effort into his company because he thought that he would be successful at it. Of course, whenever you think of technology, you can't help but think of Apple. My challenge for you guys is to go out and make something of yourself. Be determined, find your faith, and always think different.